I just fidget with things all the time, right?
Right.
I don't know if you noticed me with the chopsticks when we were eating sushi.
Oh, yeah. No, I've...
just like all the time.
I sat next to you in grade 5. I remember.
Yeah.
And then was it Miss Thompson had to split us up because you were distracting me from being a good student?
Yeah. I was the problem. I was the problem. I was distracting you from being a good student. What a load of bullshit.
Welcome. You are entering into a strange dimension. A dimension where narratives from across space and time come together. Narratives that could have, might have, or should have been all exist here in one space. This is CineCasters Ultimate Timeline.
Hello, and welcome to CineCasters. This is the show where we watch movies, and we talk about them, and we come up with an alternative version for what we think could have been done to make that movie an even stronger movie. I am Nathaniel Draper, and I am joined, as always, by my very good, very talented, very charming friend, Andrew DeYoung, over across the Atlantic Ocean.
Aw, thanks. I am across the Atlantic Ocean, and basically a full continent away as well.
Yeah, that's true. We're on. Yeah, I'm on one end of North America, and you're kind of like, I guess, in the middle of Europe.
No, I mean, like, I would say I'm not. I'm say I'm in Western Europe.
Okay.
Pretty far west. Without being in the UK, I'm almost as far west as you can go.
Okay, yeah, that makes more sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if we would call this Central Europe at all.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not actually familiar with what would be considered Western versus Central versus Eastern properly, I suppose. Anyway.
Well, I don't know. I'm not really certain either. I only live here.
Okay, so today we're doing Downsizing.
We are doing Downsizing, but before we get there, I wanted to see if I could coax you into sharing more news about your short film.
Oh, okay, yeah, sure. So my short film Shiraz is going to be playing in 3 film festivals in January. The first one is the Indie Film TO Fest. That's it. Indie Film TO Fest on January 21st at Innis Town Hall in Toronto.
Cool.
And then, the second one is actually in BC in the Vancouver Short Film Festival. That will be playing on January 25th at 8 p.m. in the Van City Theatre here in Vancouver, which is where I am right now.
Yep.
And the next screening is going to be at the Milton Film Festival on January 27th at 2 p.m. at the First Ontario Art Centre in Milton, Ontario. And it's going to
that's right.
Yeah, well, that's just where you're from.
Yeah, which is super ironic because that's my hometown, and of course, neither of us are going to be there.
Sorry, I just splashed kombucha in my face. Yes, that's correct.
Neither of us are going to be there because you're going to be in Vancouver.
Mm-hmm.
And I am, of course, in Amsterdam. So unfortunately, if you wanted to hang out with us, that's not entirely possible. But you should definitely go see that movie. Mm-hmm. Definitely go see it in Milton or in Toronto or in Vancouver. And I'll try and remember to put the dates in the description so that people know exactly when they can go see it.
Mm-hmm. Well, now that I've talked about my film, maybe you should talk about the project that you've been doing if you want to talk about it.
I do want to talk about it.
Okay, well, please do then.
As of right now, you can go and listen to my band Robot Philosopher's full album, The Universe is Calling, in full on YouTube. And the album is available for sale and download wherever you purchase your fine music goods on the 18th of January. So by the time this actually goes live, you'll already be able to go listen and purchase the album. So yeah, go check that out. I'm very, very excited. I'm in the midst of trying to promote it all around the internet. But please, if you enjoy, happy, heavy metal and strange music of all kinds, then please go and check out Robot Philosopher. We're on Facebook, we're on YouTube. You can find us wherever you listen to music. So enough shameless plugging.
I was just going to say, I was going to add an extra. I've listened to some of it, and I quite like what I've heard. I'm very excited to hear the rest of it. So everyone listening, you should go and listen to it.
Thank you. Yeah, all 12 of you. So thank you very much. But I think we should do enough shameless plugging and get right into downsizing.
All right, downsizing. So I guess I'll just start off by giving a quick summary on the film. So the film starts with it's Matt Damon. The film starts with a Norwegian scientist who has discovered this way to shrink people down to about 5 inches. And the idea is that this technology is going to allow humankind to live in a sustainable way and solve all of our environmental issues that result from overpopulation and overconsumption. Then we go to Matt Damon, who's living in, I think it's Omaha, Nebraska. And he and his wife find out about this and they want to downsize. And they go through the process of downsizing. And after the process of downsizing, he wakes up to find that she's not there, and he gets a phone call from her, and she's decided not to go through with the downsizing operation. So now he's in this place called Leisureland, which is one of the cities for small people, and he goes to their house, and he's now alone in this world. Anyway, the film follows him in this place. Years later, he's gotten divorced. He's trying to get his life back up on his feet. And in the process, he befriends a neighbor played by Christoph Waltz. And when he's visiting Christoph Waltz, he meets a woman named, I wrote it down here. Naklan, thank you. And Naklan is actually, she was a political dissident in Vietnam who was downsized and then basically escaped Vietnam by hiding in a TV box. And anyway, Matt Damon meets her through because she's cleaning Christoph Waltz's house. They become or he helps her out because she has a prosthetic leg, and he knows how to do. He's an occupational therapist, so he tries to help her out, and he ends up going and seeing other parts of Leisureland that he didn't know existed before, such as this. It's kind of a slum, I suppose. It's definitely like a poor area of Leisureland where she goes and she helps out people there who don't have food, and she looks after them. And then after this, Christoph Waltz, he's being invited to the original colony where this Norwegian scientist Jorgen, it's actually
Asbjornsen.
Jorgen Asbjornsen, thank you. Yeah. Where Jorgen Asbjornsen has his colony, and Christoph Waltz invites Matt Damon's character to come along, and Naklan comes along with them because she's being invited by this scientist because of also her prestige as being an activist. So they all go to this original colony where their plan is to actually move everybody into this underground city that's going to live there for thousands of years because scientists have just determined that there is no chance for life on Earth to survive. And Matt Damon is about to go down this tunnel with them, and at the last moment he decides not to, and he returns to Leisureland with Naklan and helps her in helping the people of the community there. So that's essentially a pretty broad overview of the plot of the movie from beginning to end. Why don't we get into our first impressions of the movie and thoughts about the movie? So why don't you start us off?
So I'll start with when I first saw the premise of the movie without watching it, like just sort of, trailers, commercials, what was it about? I was immediately interested. I was like, oh, this is going to be like a super interesting idea on, how global warming affects things and what would downsizing do in terms of helping the environment. And then when I was watching it, I was kind of hoping for this like almost Secret World of Arietti-esque, like, what is it like if with small people in the real world? Like, how would this actually work? And how does this affect the environment? And how is, but instead what we get when I saw it, I was like, literally my first thoughts going into actually watching it was I was like, this is just white people problems under the guise of a soft sci-fi, the movie. That's all I thought. I was just like, what am I watching? Like the entire time it's just Matt Damon, who does a great job, but he's supposed to be a boring character. But he does a great job of being a boring character, and I'm watching it going like, what am I supposed to be getting from this? Like, I'm constant. Like, is it about consumerism? Is it about like capitalism? Is it about environmentalism. Like, what is this movie about? I have ideas of what I think it's about, and my pitch is literally like, well, I'm going to focus on one idea. But I was like, what? I messaged you on Facebook. I was like, what did you just make me watch? Because I was like, I think I kind of get what the point was, but I'm also not certain. Like, because the movie's, I don't know, maybe it was just the trailer. The movie was like sort of given to me as though it was going to be a sci-fi, like a soft sci-fi. You know, what would happen if we could downsize people? And then I was like, yeah, it's going to be like George Shrinks. Or again, I mentioned The Secret World of Arrietty, which is my favorite Studio Ghibli movie. And it was not that at all. Once he's tiny, the whole fact that he's tiny kind of becomes irrelevant.
Okay.
Like, I mean, I thought that movie, I don't even know what to tell you. For me, this was the hardest movie to watch and come up with a pitch for, because I was like, what the fuck was the point? Usually I can get the main thrust of a movie, like what are its main ideas. I can usually watch it and be like, wow, that was a terrible job, but I know what they were going for, and then I can rewrite it. This movie, I'm glad I watched it so soon, or like I watched it earlier than I normally do for new movies that we do on CineMasters. Usually I watch them the night before and write my pitch that night after watching the movie, but I actually took a day to sort of be like, what? Because I was very confused by this movie. So
okay,
I'm curious to see what your thoughts are and why you picked it.
Okay, interesting. So I've seen it. I saw it when it came out in theaters. I'm going to start by saying this. So it's written and directed by Alexander Payne, who is one of my favorite directors. I'm a huge, huge fan of Alexander Payne.
What else has he done?
So he's done Sideways with Paul Giamatti, The Descendants with George Clooney. That was the one he actually won an Oscar for Best Adapted Screenplay. My personal favorite of his films is About Schmidt, which is Jack Nicholson riding an RV across the country to try and convince his daughter not to marry the person she's about to marry. I think it's one of the most beautiful films ever. It's got the ending gets me every time. And then my other favorite is Election with Reese Witherspoon and Matthew Broderick.
Yeah.
That one's a classic. I actually think this is also a brilliant film too. I picked it because I know that there was a lot of criticism, or it wasn't received very well. And when I watched it the first time, there were things about it. There were like little things that I went, oh, okay, like they could have, like this was maybe something people were bumping on. Maybe this is something people were bumping on. So I wondered if I had just missed something the first time, because I came out of the theater going, that was amazing. Like that was, and I watched it with my family and they're like, what are you talking about? Like that was a dumb movie. I'm like, no, it's brilliant.
Did you just use me as a guinea pig?
I may have, yes. But I watched it again. Well, and here's the thing. I watched it again because I wondered if my opinion would change watching it a second time. And it didn't. I actually still appreciate it the second time around. However, there are some things with it that I can see where the holdup might be happening for some people. So I have written here like things I liked most, if not all of the movie. It's a very subtle film. So the other thing too is I think also because I've seen his other movies, he has a very specific sense of humor that's very, very underplayed and very awkward. And all of his characters are very pathetic people. And a lot of the humor is around them trying to just function like a normal person and being completely unable to. So, and he basically took that and put it into a sci-fi. So I could see so for me, I think maybe I was already acclimatized to it because I just am familiar with kind of his style. And to me, it was like, oh, he just took his style and made it in a sci-fi universe. Like, with these just very awkward characters and there are these kind of, well, I wouldn't say this one follows real life situations. His other films follow real life situations. So in terms of like thematic elements to the film, for me, the film is all about, it's about America's like commercialization and overconsumption. And I can see it does get that. It does grab at a lot of things. And so it does seem a little far reaching in points. I do feel like I'll get into now what I think were the flaws with the film. I think the biggest, if I had to deduct points for the movie, it would be in that at a certain point in the movie, the character, I'm referring to Matt Damon's character, he stops acting and things start happening to him. So, and this happens specifically after his wife decides not to go.
Oh, you mean
downsize.
He starts becoming a passive heroine instead of a active heroine?
Yes, exactly.
So when you say Matt Damon's character stops acting, you don't mean like Matt Damon stopped acting.
No. I don't mean to criticize the performances. I think the performances are all amazing.
I also agree. I think the performances were also excellent. But I think what you mean is like the character stops having autonomy, like making decisions for themselves, and agency, and things start happening to the character.
Exactly.
Passive heroine versus active heroine.
Exactly. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I mean. So in my pitch, I came up with a way in which I think that can be addressed. But I will also add this personally. I actually think the film's fine as it is. I think it's a great film. I actually think it's a film we're going to look back on in 10 years and go, hey, we didn't really give that one a proper look.
Yeah. I do want to get in, because a lot of what I talked about before was a lot of its flaws, because I was sort of like, what am I watching? But I will say that I did immediately get the consumerism. I thought it was going to be a little bit more political. I almost wish it was, like the way that, the one character in the bar was like, oh, should you even get the same votes as we are because you're little people? And I was like, okay, I could see this going somewhere, like using little downsizing as a stand-in for, certain political differences in opinion. So I could see that going somewhere. So I do think that perhaps there was a lot of ideas maybe packed into one thing, but the consumerism was easily dealt with. Like you could see that on the surface. And I think that was well done. I also think that the characterization of everyone was really well done. Like you definitely feel like Paul is pathetic. Not that he's like this, you don't feel sorry for him, but you just get that he's sort of this like everyday kind of guy who happens to be moving through life rather than, and that's why I think this passive heroism that you talk about is important, because things happen to Paul. He doesn't do things, and I think that's why the character works in this movie. Whereas every other character around him actually has agency. The only character who really doesn't, and is minor, is that woman that Paul goes on a date with. Because Paul decides to break up with her rather than.
Yeah.
But I think the reason that works is because every character aside from Paul has agency. Every character he winds up with, we see Conrad, we see Duchesne, we see Knocklan, even Kristen Wiig's character, whose name I can't remember, still has agency. She chooses not to go, and so I think that's why having the movie move around Paul makes a lot of sense, because he is passive, like a lot of anyone is. We don't make decisions in life, and I think my pitch still deals with that, but in a different way. I will say that the whole, as soon as they start shaving Matt Damon for the downsizing process, we almost hear like no dialogue at all. It's all not plot, no exposition, just sort of random people talking, and the whole thing is done in a waltz. So that's 3/4 time for anyone who's not a music student, but the whole thing's done in a waltz, and it is quite fascinating to watch. But it's also really long for a movie that doesn't actually deal with tiny people. Like the movie isn't really about people being small. So I was surprised. I really liked that whole segment. I thought the music was excellent. I thought the visualization was excellent. But I was sort of watching it being like, okay, but like at the end, when I think back to that part, I'm like, that waltz part was great, but it was long and it didn't really matter.
Okay, interesting. Well, it's interesting because one comment you made that I do find interesting is about how the small people seems inconsequential. I do think it's a big part of, like, because the whole question is so for me, I would actually frame it as kind of like a weird abstract ethical question. If you could downsize yourself, as they do in this world, with the plan being you would essentially reduce your waste consumption significantly and reduce your impact on the environment, would you do it? And I actually think I would.
I think that I would too, but then it becomes more of a backdrop, which is fine. I'm okay with it being a backdrop. It's like the real crux of the story isn't the fact that people are tiny. There's nothing wrong with that. And because I think it actually says more about what you said about consumerism, because what we wind up getting is people choose to downsize because then their wealth, goes up exponentially, which makes sense. But then again, why have this, 10-minute long waltz? Again, shot very well, musically very well done, but why have it for a movie that uses downsizing as a backdrop to deal with consumerism and deal with environmentalism?
Okay, yeah,
right?
I can see that. Yeah.
And that's why I felt like even when I was watching this waltz thing, I was like, this is really cool, and I'm enjoying this shooting. But I was also like, again, after I finished the movie, I was also like, that segment was long for a movie that. I mean, I think you're right. I think it's subtle in the way it deals with things. But I think my pitch is better, probably because I'm a little narcissistic. I do also want to say that Noklan, I don't know the actress's name who plays Noklan, but she is the best part of this movie.
She's pretty
hands
great.
Down.
Yeah.
Her emotional performance, comedic performance, sincerity, everything that she does, just because, I mean, like I said, Matt Damon's a great actor, but because his character is a little bit blah and is supposed to be blah, and he's played very blah, which works out, but compared to Noklan is both, fiery and compassionate, but still has this pathetic quality that you were talking about, still has this sentimentality and this sort of almost casual hilarity.
Yeah.
She comes up to Paul and she's sort of just
Hong Chow is her name.
Yeah? Well, she did a phenomenal job. So
yeah.
When she comes up to Paul and is like, what kind of fuck you give me? or even just the way she says it, because she'll be like, at the end when they get into the plane and he's like, we're all going to die. Everyone's going to die. And Noklan goes, now you understand how I feel after TV box.
Right.
And that was a traumatic incident for her, the TV box, but it's also it's hilarious just the way
it's a funny situation, it's a funny idea, box. Yeah.
And I think the two characters who do that the best are actually Duchesne and Noklan, but especially Noklan.
Yeah, I would agree.
Unreal performance.
See, here's the that was interesting. When I first saw the movie, I thought she was way too over the top. But I watched it again and I went, oh no, she's doing a lot of really great things with the character, especially the scene when she talks about because it's one of those scenes where it's really, really sweet, but it's also kind of funny. It's when she's talking to Christoph Waltz and Matt Damon and she's explaining, oh, Jesus opened this door for me and now I get to go, and she starts crying, and it's actually really funny, but it's also really it's like a duality. She really cares about this, and you really get that feeling from her. So I would agree. Actually, watching it a second time, I would agree now. It's actually her performance is actually really strong.
I actually think even though all of the things, because we do see some change in character to Paul. We see his character change, but it's all subtle. And I think without Noklan there to sort of beat you over the head with the premise, you'd miss it.
Right. Yeah.
So I can also see when you say I think her performance is a little overdone, but I also think her performance works because without that there, it would be so subtle that you might not actually get the change to Paul.
Yeah. I could see that. Yeah. I mean, it's certainly a really nice counterpoint to his just awkward, just oblivious nature. Yeah. Okay. Well, do you have any other thoughts? Anything else you'd like to say about the movie?
I think it had a lot of ideas, but I'm going to save my overall thrust of what I thought the movie was for my pitch, so that I can really nail my pitch. So
okay. Do we rock paper scissors for who does their pitch first, or do you just want to go first?
Oh, I'll just go first.
Okay,
because you're hosting, so I'll go first.
Okay, yeah. Why don't you go ahead?
Yeah. You picked the movie, so I go first. That's how we usually do it.
I guess it is. Yeah. Okay. I just thought maybe it'd be fun to switch it up with a game of rock paper scissors over Skype, but you go ahead.
No, it's all good. Okay, so my thing with this movie was when I first saw it, and the thing that gave it away for me, gave me the idea was, in the beginning we see when the downsizing first happens, and we see the announcement given to like the United Nations or the scientific community, and Paul's like watching on TV, and he's like, hey, can I get that takeout? And then he takes the takeout home, and we see him do his thing with his mom. And then like 10 years later, he's in the same spot, and he goes, hey, can I get that takeout? But this time he takes it home to his wife. Immediately I started thinking that this might be like a repetition, like cycles of repetition. And so it started to get me to think about two people in particular. One was Nietzsche, because I love Nietzsche, and the other was Heidegger, because Heidegger expounds on this, but Nietzsche has this idea called what does he call it? Eternal recurrence. And then it's illuminated on Heidegger, which is things happening, like basically hell is things happening over and over again with no change. But instead of the hell being about Paul, it's more about society as a whole in terms of consumerism. I also thought about Eudaimonia, which is an idea from Socrates. I didn't go much into detail on this on my pitch, but Eudaimonia is this idea that, in order to have eternal happiness, you have all these things given to you. But Socrates also exclaims that in Eudaimonia, some people can attain perfect happiness, a state of perfect happiness, but other people can't. Not everyone can have this state, because some people need to serve them. So I kind of felt like those who were small were trying to achieve eudaimonia, but could only achieve it by those who were large. Like they still had to have large people do things for them.
Okay.
So the eudaimonia was one idea that I didn't flesh out in my pitch, but I think it also could have been something. So with that,
so you're saying like the smaller people. I mean, I'm sure you get into detail on this, but the idea is like smaller people require the assistance of larger people to fulfill
I think
this?
there could have. I think there could have been something done with that. I think there kind of was. I'm just saying, like, that was an idea that struck me that I didn't do a whole lot with in my pitch.
Oh, okay.
I just wanted to get it out there, like this is one direction that I was thinking about, but I wound up going in another direction.
Okay, cool.
I wound up following down this idea of eternal recurrence and having almost like this existential idea about consumerism. So less, I guess, of an existential thing, like existential hell, and more like an environmental revelation and consumerist revelation on Paul's part, but still very subtle, because I think the movie works that way. So I'm going to get into it.
All right.
So on the whole, the movie would actually start pretty much the same. So we see the two scenes that I just said where Paul gets takeout, and then 10 years later he gets takeout, but this time it's for his wife. So that would all pretty much be the same. I'd want the first half of the movie to be a little bit shorter, and the actual downsizing process, we can still have that take some time. Like them, I want to show them sort of like driving to the place, but have the actual process take way less time, because the actual process isn't necessary for the movie, as I already talked about. But we still have Paul come out, and then Kristen Wiig's character call him, and she's like, no, I don't want to do it. I couldn't do it. How could you make me do it? All that sort of thing. And so we see that happen. So then a year later, we see Paul again getting takeout, but now he's super small.
Oh, okay. Oh, interesting.
So we see Paul getting takeout again, but this time he's super small, and he takes the takeout. So we have the divorce scene. I missed this. We have the divorce scene, and we see that Paul is basically like what his life was before he was downsized, but now he's tiny. So now he's downsized, but his life is pretty much the same. So then we see him getting takeout, and he brings it home for the date that he's having with that single mom that he was seeing. I don't remember her character because she was super unimportant and super unassuming and kind of looked like what I would think a suburban witch would look like. Do you know what I mean? Like, you look at her and you're like, whoa, wow, it's a hag. Oh, wait, no, you're just bland. She's just a suburban witch. Okay, I think I broke Nathaniel. Anyway, she's
Well,
just super
I
unassuming.
really hope she's not listening to this.
Oh no. Maybe she's one of the 12. Go listen to my album then. Anyway, so he brings the takeout back home to the suburban witch, and then they don't break up. They just have sort of this bland evening, and you know, their night gets ruined by the loud music. So she says goodnight to Paul, and he's like, yeah, fine, and it's all awkward, but they don't break up. They don't break up with each other. They just sort of like have this sort of like, okay, like see you later, and then Paul goes to the party and we can still have the crazy time at the party, that's fine. And then the next morning he meets Nok Lan, and then goes outside we have that whole thing where he goes outside the wall and he sees how poor people are living. He asks why it's happening. And in the actual movie, Nok Lan alludes to the selfishness of the people in Leisure Town. I think it's called Leisure Garden.
I think it's Leisureland.
Leisureland.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
Well, I went through every other possibility. So basically the idea is like the rich get rich and the poor stay poorer, and get poorer. And you know, Nok Lan sort of alludes in the movie that like people are selfish in Leisureland, and you know, Paul says, why is this happening? Like, when you downsize, doesn't your wealth also downsize or get larger, you know, proportionally? And Nok Lan is like, well, if you don't have anything, then your wealth doesn't get any bigger, right? So if you're already poor, you can't get poorer. So basically alluding to the fact that like, you know, the rich are rich, and when you downsize, they get richer, and if you don't have anything, then you're still poor.
Right.
Duchesne says, or I think either Duchesne or Conrad, I think it's Conrad actually, says something similar as well. He says, you know, being small is amazing. If you're rich and small, then you're richer, and if you're not rich, then you're just small.
Right. Okay,
and I think I wanted to go in that direction. So then we have Paul go back to the outer city, and we still have him break Nok Lan's prosthetic foot. But here we get a scene where Nok Lan and Paul actually go to the doctors, the insurance agency, and I want this scene to mirror what it was like with Paul and Kristen Wiig trying to decide what house they wanted, but this time it's Paul and Nok Lan trying to get enough funding to get a new prosthetic.
Oh, okay, interesting.
But it's shot the same way and it looks the same way, but at this time they're turned away. She can't afford it. And it will take too long. So then in the meantime, Nok Lan still needs to run her cleaning business. I do want to emphasize that because it's sort of alluded to again, but she runs the business. Like all the women are like, she owns that business. All the women that are there work for her. I want to maybe push that a little bit more because I think it was way too understated.
They hint at it. They don't make a direct like statement.
A big deal out of it.
This is her.
I mean, we don't need to make a big deal out of it either, but I just wanted to be like, hey, like Nok Lan runs this business. Like not only is she super compassionate towards the community, not only is she a badass political dissident who just didn't want her community ruined, but also she runs her own business and doesn't have to, looks after others before the needs of her own. So then Paul winds up, he sees more of how she looks after the community because she's basically immobile or less mobile, and he has to help her clean. So during this time, I want it to be less of a montage. Still montagey bits because montage works well for the passage of time. But I want to see Paul and Nok Lan actually spend more time together, like how they get on each other's nerves and like bicker and argue. But we see them actually beginning to form a relationship instead of just him massaging her leg and then wanting to go, fuck. I mean, it still works in the movie, but it was a little odd. I was sort of just like, we're here now.
It is abrupt, yeah. But
yeah. And maybe I'm just a sucker for like a slow burning romance, as an ardent flame as opposed to a explosion of fluids. I'm just gonna leave that one there.
Okay, swiftly moving along.
Yeah, so we see them sort of, and then we go back to the suburban witch, the woman that Paul is dating, and she's like upset that Paul is spending so much time with somebody else. And he's sort of like, you know, nothing's happening between me and Naklan, but there definitely is something happening. And we as an audience can see it. And he's like, no, don't worry about it. Like, I broke her foot, so I owe her. And he's like, but like, you should see all the stuff this woman does. Like she's so broken and beat up, but like she still looks after the community. Like, that's why, you know, I see it. And so he convinces her to come and take the bus to the outside wall, like outside the wall, to help others. So he goes ahead because he has to help Naklan, and she's on the bus, and then it cuts to him working, and he gets a phone call, and it's her calling from outside or inside the wall, basically mirroring the same thing that Kristen Wiig did. She says, you know, I can't go outside the wall. It's, you know, they're not like us. They're all poor people and immigrants, and you know, why would you convince me to do this? I can't go through with this. And so he's like, really? Like, okay, I guess we're not together anymore. And she's like, you know, why would you make me go to a place where I feel unsafe? I didn't want to do this. Basically mirroring what Kristen Stewart's character
Right.
did,
Okay. So
outside the wall.
Can I just ask for a clarification on one thing?
Yeah.
So he has seen this place outside before she has.
Yeah. So
okay,
he's been going all the time to help Naklan.
I see. Okay.
Right. And then she's like, well, where do you keep going? And he's like, I'll show you. Like, come.
Right.
I'll show you. And she gets on the bus, and it's all, you know, minorities. It's all, you know,
Right.
Hispanics and Vietnamese and black people all on this bus. And she doesn't feel comfortable. And when it's right about before it's going through the tunnel, you know, we cut to Paul, and he gets a phone call, and it's from her.
Okay.
Saying, like, I couldn't do it. Basically the same thing that Kristen Wiig did with Downsizing.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Yeah, all good there. So then Paul and Naklan show up to clean Duchesne's apartment, and Duchesne finally sees them, and he's like, oh, Paul, what the hell happened to you? You're super pathetic. And he's like, well, I broke her prosthetic. And then Paul comes up with a plan, and he goes, I can get you the parts. And then so, like, a day or two later, like super fast, Paul is surprised when the parts show up with Duchesne, but Duchesne tells him that the parts are illegal. He didn't get them through proper channels. And Paul realizes that because of what Duchesne does, he can get medicine and prosthetics for the people who need them but can't afford them. So then Naklan and Paul can fall in love with a similar scene to the one in the original movie, because I think that one works. But it's just beneficial to like see how that relationship might develop.
Right. There's a little bit more of a build up to it.
I also want him to do like massage her neck the same way he did with Kristen Wiig's character. So like he can sort of start with, you know, moisturizing her leg, but I want to see him like do the neck thing, the quote unquote neck thing that he did, that they referenced in the beginning. I want to see him do it with Naklan. And then they can, you know, have their love.
Their explosion of fluids.
I'm regretting saying that one. So then we can get the news that the world is ending, but we get it via the television. So Downsizing didn't do anything to stop it, and Paul has a bit of a crisis over the futility. You know, he's like, I downsized and the world downsized and it's not helping. Why didn't it do anything? And he can have a little bit of an angst fest, but sort of in a Paul way, because I don't feel like Paul is the kind of guy to like throw his fists in the air and scream at the sky like, why? But more of like he just sort of gets this moody depression until Naklan basically like snaps at him and is like, I'm not going to do the accent because I don't want to come across as racist, but he basically says, you know, like, why are you upset? You know what I mean? Like, why are you like this? And he's like, because, you know, everything is awful and we're all going to die and it's hard. And then so she kind of explains like, yeah, it is, but like, you know, I survived the TV box and you have to be grateful, even though life is hard, even though life is boring, you have to be grateful for what you have. You know, she came out of the TV box and didn't have a leg anymore, but that didn't stop her from surviving. It didn't stop her from running a business. It doesn't stop her from, you know, having compassion for others. And so she kind of berates him for being self-centered about his own existential angst about the world ending. So then in the last sequence, is Paul again getting takeout, but this time he brings it to Naklan, and along with the meds from Duchesne and Conrad, they go back to the outside community, and Paul realizes that although his life has not changed, and it's all, a series of repeating events over and over again, the way he fell in love with Noklan, the way his suburban witch left him, the same way that his wife left him, his ex-wife now, the same way that he fell in love and used the neck thing with Noklan, the same way he gets takeout. Nothing has changed that way, but it's the subtle things. It's the way you as Noklan says, it's now you understand what it was like for me when I survived the TV box. We're all going to die. Everyone's going to die. There's nothing we can do about it. Downsizing didn't change anything. There's still poor people. There's still rich people. But what we do is we help each other. And that's what makes the repetition of the banality that this movie is so good at showing matter. That's what makes the difference. And so Paul actually is in the same situations he's always been, but now he has a purpose, and now he has, meaning in that sort of cyclical hell.
This sounds very Sisyphean.
Yeah, well, actually, I mean, the myth of Sisyphus and the eternal recurrence are very similar ideas between Camus and Nietzsche.
Was it Heidegger?
And then Hegel.
Okay, right.
Heidegger. Heidegger, not Hegel, I think. Let me just double check that.
Yeah, because
Heidegger.
It was Heidegger. Okay.
Yeah, and so these ideas. I wanted to show it instead of an existential crisis about personal existential matters. It was more about existentialism about the human race as a whole, but told through Paul and Noklan. It's about how we try these new ideas like downsizing, and yet there's still poor people. The environment is still going to die. All of these things are still problems. After the TV box, Noklan still lived her life. She still had to make money somehow, right? So she keep going. Things didn't get better for her just because she was a political dissident. The problems just went from, how do I save my village to, well, essentially, how do I save my village? Except this time, Noklan decided instead of being a political dissident, she was just going to work for money and help her community, because clearly the government didn't care about her village in Vietnam from being flooded, and the government doesn't care about this ghetto outside of the wall. They're clearly outside of the wall.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's unintentional. The fact that they're outside of the community, they can't afford to live in the community.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I see is this sort of and this one works really, really well because it's downsizing, but there's this idea in fractals. I can't remember how to say it in Latin, but give me one sec. I'll look it up.
So while you're on that, I was going to ask you a question about your pitch. One of the things I'm curious about is, why is it that Noklan is scared to go outside the wall the first time?
Why is what?
Why is Noklan actually? Why does she not want to go outside?
No. She does. She brings Paul outside the wall.
Oh, okay. I must have misheard you because she's on the bus, right, and she gets off before she.
No. That's Paul's. The current girl he's dating.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
The suburban witch.
Okay.
Yeah. So Noklan brings.
So
Paul
Noklan brings him there. Okay, sorry. I conflated.
And then the suburban witch is like, "Why are you spending all this time away from me?" And he goes, "Well, I accidentally broke this woman's foot, and she does so much for her community, and because she can't move, I have to, I feel indebted to her." And so, and he's like, "But you should, if you want to see what I'm doing, and I'm not cheating on you, if you want to see what I'm doing,
right,
come outside the wall." And so she gets on the bus. And she sees all these minorities, feels uncomfortable.
That makes a lot more sense. Okay.
Yeah, and then bails.
Sorry, that was my fault. I'm somehow I missed that detail.
No, that's okay. So I'm trying to find it in Latin, but I can't find it. But in fractals, there's this idea called "as above, so below." It's an aphorism used to describe the sacred geometry of fractals. So basically, in fractal patterns in nature, a true fractal appears as a geometric event that occurs at every level. And so I thought this was really, really good because in downsizing, the same problems occurred. Nothing was solved.
Oh, right.
So
interesting. It doesn't change
above,
nature.
Right. Nothing changes in terms of politics, economics, socioeconomic disparity, environmental issues. All of those were the same. So, but I think it works really well because it's like as above. So when everyone was big, these were the problems. So below, everything is the same.
Oh, that's pretty brilliant, actually.
Yeah,
I like
and that's
that.
that's also what I was trying to go for in my pitch. Is all these reoccurrent events happened when Paul was big. So his wife leaving, everything like that. They all reoccur when he's small.
Yeah.
But the difference is how his attitude changes.
Right. Okay. I like how you've almost personalized the story for him a little bit more, which is something I also tried to do with my pitch, where it's more
I feel like if Paul and Naklan are going to be our main characters, then there has to be a bit of a personal journey to tell the story of the overall environmental and political problem.
Right.
Basically, I'm just using them as a vehicle to tell the overall story.
Right. Yeah.
So it's like that's why I wanted to shorten the actual downsizing process.
Right. Because it's not about that.
It isn't about that.
No,
cool as that. Again, as cool as that shot was, and I love me a waltz. And it's shot like a ballet, so the waltz works really, really well. But the story should be focusing on Paul, but then in the background, both in the shots and in the movie, we see things like it's always the minorities who are servicing others. It's always it's always the environment that suffers. It's always this overabundant consumerism, but this is all in the background, much the way it is in the original movie.
Right.
It's already like that in the original.
But the other thing, too, that I think you've done well, one thing that actually was problematic, I do think, there is a lot of serendipity in the original, which, I mean, I don't have an issue with, but what I do like is that you've kept it contained in this same geographical
Well, I mean, we
area.
spend all this time talking about downsizing. I feel like there's no point in actually leaving the movie, or leaving that Leisureland.
Right, yeah. It does make more sense. Yeah.
I mean, them going to Norway, and then all of a sudden Naklan is there, and him breaking her foot, and like all these things happen, and Paul sort of talks about it. He sort of goes, why was I meant to be here? I'm meant to be here.
Yeah,
and I'm sort of like,
exactly.
I wish I could argue it. I mean, I think it's all coincidence, but I'm also a determinist, so that says a lot about how I see the world.
Oh, you're a determinist. It's okay. I'm a little bit. I've got my foot in that camp. Let's say.
I think that nature is what nature is. There is no fate. Everything that happens is it just is. We are only made up of bits and pieces. There is no soul. There is no greater being. It's just determinism. Also indeterminism, which is the same thing.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm more or less of the same mind.
Yeah. So, but that says a lot about how I read those kinds of situations. But the way the movie sort of presents that to us sort of makes me kind of go, well, I can't argue with you because all of this did happen. And yes, it's serendipitous, but I haven't seen anything in the movie to contradict it. So I can't say yes or no.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
I like your pitch. That's really cool. I like how you've brought them together. And then I also think what I like about what you've done is how because there's the character, the suburban witch, who
suburban witch,
she doesn't really, she actually could have not existed in the movie. She doesn't really. Right. The whole thing is, they're on a date. It goes bad. He decides to go to a party, which is where he meets Christoph Waltz, which is where I get into which is where I'm going with. There's a lot of things that just start happening to him instead of him taking action. But yeah, no, good work.
Oh, thank you. I actually, I think upon seeing the movie, I wasn't sure that I liked it. I'm still not sure that I liked it. But now that I have done my pitch and I've had someone to talk about it with, like really like, analyze it philosophically and cinematographically. I feel like I'm liking it more and more just because we get to talk about it. Like it's one of those movies where it's more fun to talk about than it is to actually watch.
Right, yeah. Although I do find it fun to watch too, because I actually think it's hilarious from beginning to end. I think there are moments of humor, but I don't know. Maybe I'm just not as big a fan of that awkward humor because, like, I know Kristen Wiig's character is supposed to be pathetic and annoying, but like when she leaves Paul, I was like,
you're a bitch. Like, I was really upset by that. I was like, that's not what it means to be married. I don't know. Maybe I just have relationship issues and was like, you, like, when you're, like that, you can't just get divorced because somebody I thought
Shrunk
you made
down
that
to 5
decision together.
inches. Yeah.
Oh, it made me very angry. Anyway, I want to hear your pitch. So
okay, so here's my pitch. So I'm going to start by saying I love the movie as it is. I don't think it needs to change, but I humored the idea of if I was to change something, what would that look like? And I started with where I would said before, if I was to knock off points for the movie, it would be right after he gets divorced and then things start happening to him. So I thought, okay, so what do we have to do to fix that? So I thought, well, he kind of needs a goal. At that point, there seems to be what's missing is he doesn't have anything he's really striving to get. So my solution to that was, here we are, to actually make the film be focus more on the divorce process, being a small person and being married to someone who's actually a tall person. Oh. And then having that basically act as what would be what your traditional screenplay lingo is the A plot, and then the Knockland story be the quote unquote B plot.
I follow.
So in the version I would propose is in the weeks after Paul's wife leaves, they start the divorce process. Basically, at first he's like, no, I'm going to get her to change her mind. She's just freaking out, but she'll come around and she'll realize that I can't grow back anymore. Instead of cutting right to 1 year later, you actually want to go right to the next day. Like we continue on. Okay. So it'd be him in his house and him thinking about it and going, you know what, like maybe she'll come around. Maybe she'll, I get it. Like she, it's a nervous thing. And I do love the shot where she's phoning him from the airport and you see one eyebrows being shaved.
Yeah, been shaved, and she's got her hood on because she's embarrassed about being bald.
She's like, they started shaving my eyebrows and I freaked out.
They started shaving my head, and it's okay.
So I thought, okay, well, let's what would that look like? So it starts off with him saying, well, maybe she'll come around, maybe she'll change her mind, and then later she doesn't. She's like, actually, no, I've thought about it some more, and I really can't do it. I'm too scared of what that would be like. I don't want to give all this up. And when I was in the room, something came over me, and I was terrified, and I changed my mind, and I tried to find you to get them to stop it, but I couldn't. It was too late. And you already went through the process, and I've made up my mind. I don't want to do this. And so you would have that basically be the A plot. And through this time, he's still living in the mansion. He still has all their assets. Their assets are still split because they're still technically married. I don't actually know exactly how it works, but basically my thinking is he's still able to live in the mansion for a while, and he hires a cleaning service because that's just something that comes with the house. And Knockland is and she's the one who comes to clean his house, and that's how he meets her. Oh, and he doesn't connect the dots at first. He just sees her and he goes, "Oh, what's wrong with your leg? You have a prosthetic leg. We should fix that." But it's not a priority for him. Like he does help her out with the physiotherapy, and he's like, we should get you a new prosthetic leg. Saying it, thinking that she'll go get a new prosthetic leg, and she doesn't. But he's just not aware at this point. He's just unaware that people in Leisureland that there's a class system in Leisureland. So he thinks he's just saying, you should just get a new leg, thinking that she'll go do it, but she can't because she can't afford it, and he's just not aware of it. Anyway, there's a scene where eventually gets a scene where they bring in their lawyers. And it'd be like your traditional kind of like Kramer versus Kramer. They're sitting down at the tables. Their lawyer's there, but he's 5 inches tall, and he's standing on the table.
Oh, the lawyer is like 5 inches tall?
No. Matt Damon's 5 inches tall. The lawyers are actually like tall lawyers. But
the lawyers are okay. They're both tall.
Yeah, but Matt Damon's only 5 inches tall. So it'd basically be like one of those scenes, but the difference, the comedy in the scene is that they're talking to someone who's 5 inches tall.
Yeah.
And he makes the point that, no, I did this for you. I shrunk down because I thought you wanted this. You wanted to live in this house. And she questions his altruism, which is something they sort of do in the movie. But I liked this idea of him saying he wants to do something because he thinks it's important, wants to change the world. Mm-hmm. But then actually questioning that and going, well, how altruistic are you actually? Like, you're now living in this big mansion.
Yeah.
And you say that you're doing this because you want to be helping, but now you seem much more defensive about keeping the life that you had before, but now, in this big mansion.
And so I think that works really well too if we have her earlier in the movie convince him to get the bigger mansion.
Right.
Because then it's more like a real stab in the back.
Exactly, yeah.
He just wanted
that's a good idea. Yeah. But anyway, so then they debate, and eventually they say, okay, well, this is the agreement. If you decide not to press this further, this is the deal we'll make with you. And because she's feeling maybe a little bit guilty, he's going to get enough that he can still live comfortably, but they're not going to be married anymore. Anyway, the lawyer says, you should just take this deal and walk away and you'll be fine. Like, it's not going to happen. And he goes, no, I'm not going to give up. I am still going to keep fighting this because I know she's going to change her mind.
They alluded to that in the movie too, that he didn't take the first deal.
Exactly. That is where it goes, but I thought it'd be interesting to show what happens in between. Anyway, while he's trying to figure this out, he's back at home. He goes back to the mansion, is all by himself, and this time he sees Knockland, and she's struggling, and he sees her with a prosthetic leg, and he goes, why haven't you fixed it yet? And she goes, I go to the doctor and they can't help me. And he goes, okay, let's go to the doctor. I will go to the doctor with you, because he's now like, you have to do this. You have to get this leg fixed. They go to the doctor, and it's actually, you suggested the scene before. They go to an insurance company, or a doctor. But and what I was thinking is they go, and he's there to help her, and he says, why can't you? I'm here with this woman. She needs a new prosthetic leg. What do we have to do to make that happen? And the doctor says, oh, sorry, there's a long waiting list and we can't get to her. But he sees other people being helped, and he goes, why are they being helped? And then the doctor, somehow they figure out those people have money and can pay for health care, and she doesn't. So then he goes, okay, fine, whatever. How much is it going to cost? And he decides to foot the bill for it. So he decides he's actually going to...
Foot the bill? Foot the bill? Sorry, I couldn't resist.
Yeah. Anyway,
I apologize.
He basically pays for the prosthetic leg, and at first he's like, I'm going to fix it for you. He's like, don't worry, I'm not going to pay for it. I'm actually going to fix it. And then he breaks her leg. And it's the same thing there. So then he actually goes back and pays for a prosthetic leg. And, but somewhere in here, I've actually skipped over some of my notes. He's actually been spending time with her, because when he sees her struggling, he actually goes back to where she lives and sees that same place where she's living. And that's when his eyes are open to, oh, this is what's going on. So after this, Knockland's got a new leg, and Paul and his wife actually go to a court. They eventually go and they fight it, and he loses, and he doesn't get the settlement. He gets a bad deal, basically, as a result. And then it goes to him having to sign that thing, the scene where he's trying to sign the form, and the guy's like, could you print it a little bit bigger, please?
Yeah. A little bit bigger.
Yeah, exactly. And then but then instead of moving into an apartment, he just moves into a smaller house. It's still a beautiful house, but it's not that big mansion that they had. It's just it'd still be something that'd be very comfortable to live in. And
well, I mean, even the apartment he had in the original movie was still pretty bitchin'.
Exactly, yeah. It was a great apartment. I mean, I'd be happy to live there.
I would be happy to live there. If I could afford an apartment like that by myself, I think that's pretty good.
Yeah, I would say you're pretty, and I would agree with that. My notes are all over the place. But when he goes back, when he loses the court case, he has to start making cuts, and one of the things he has to lose is the cleaning service. So he loses Knockland's service before he loses the house. He wants to hang on to the house more than those other things.
Yeah.
And this is when she questions him and saying, you say you're doing this to help people, to try and make a difference. Knockland questions him.
Yeah.
Says, you say you're doing this to try and make a difference, yet you seem to care. She doesn't say this necessarily, but she suggests this. You seem to care more about this other stuff than you do about actually helping. If you actually cared about helping, why, would you be so desperate to hang on to this house? Anyway, so he cuts the cleaning service, and then eventually he realizes, I can't keep this house. He's got to move to a smaller house. And then he goes to the party. There's a friend of his that he goes to visit who's having the party, and he sees his friend has a bigger mansion than his, and he's talking with his friend. He's like, I don't know if I made the right choice. I wanted to do this for my wife, and I thought I was going to make a difference, but now I'm in a smaller house. I don't exactly know if I made the right choice. And then someone at the party says, Jorgen Asbjornsen's going to be here next week. He's giving a talk next week. I think, we should go to that. That would actually be really cool. So he goes to this talk from Jorgen Asbjornsen, and Knockland's actually the one who introduces him. She's now actually dressed in this beautiful dress, and she's up on the podium and says to everyone, like, this is Jorgen Asbjornsen, give him a round of applause. Jorgen Asbjornsen steps up on the stage and says, thank you everyone for downsizing. You're all doing a very good thing. But we have now determined that things are getting worse. And so in Norway, we are doing this experiment, and he's the one to explain, this is what we're doing. We're building this underground vault that we can live in and we can survive in. And this is the next project. And we're still trying to build people who are interested in our one in Nevada. We're doing one in America as well. Anyway, afterwards, Paul finds Knockland and tries to talk to her, and she introduces him to Jorgen Asbjornsen, and they have dinner together. And Jorgen explains, time passes, they're having dinner, and Paul explains, I went to downsize, I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, and Jorgen says, well, it's interesting, we introduced downsizing to Americans, and it didn't catch on at first, but when they commercialized it, suddenly people wanted to do it. I mean, It's not the idea, but it's still helping, so I'm not complaining, but I'm looking for people who want to live in this place in Nevada, and we need people with your experience. And he offers to Paul, would you be interested in moving to Nevada? Oh, and I had this gag I wrote where he says, we've been doing some experiments. At first they weren't working so well, and then it cuts to this desert in Nevada, and you see all these tiny people running across the screen, and then there's this giant iguana that's chasing after them.
That's a good cut.
And then he says, but now it's working, and now we're ready to go, but we're just looking for the right people. So Paul says, that's what I'm going to do. So then he goes back to his house, and then he spends the next few weeks selling things. And in this time, during that period, he's spending lots of time with Knockland, and he's still helping out the people where she lives. And eventually it's almost time, it's a week away from him to leave. And he's like, come with me. I want you to come with me. I'm going to miss you, and I think you should come with me. I think it'd be great. We're actually going to be doing something for the human race. And she explains to him, she says, yeah, but she asks him again, are you really doing this because you want to help? You're helping here. You're helping people here who are still being in the world today, and you're helping them. But why do you want to go live in this place? Why is that? Are you just trying to run away from things? Are you angry? Why is it that you're actually doing this? Anyway, he decides, no, I'm going to go to Nevada. And he actually goes to Nevada, and he shows up at this place, and he's ready to go in the tunnel, and he sees that everybody else there, it's all families. And then it's him. And then they're walking down the tunnel, and he goes, wait a minute, I don't want to be in this place alone. And I actually maybe did have something pretty good back there. And so he decides actually he's not going to go forward with it. He goes back to Leisureland. And when he gets back, this is the other thing. He left because he didn't have, all of his savings were going to be depleted, and he was going to have to take a job. So he goes back, he sold his house, he takes an apartment. It's maybe not quite as nice as the one in the movie, but it's an apartment that he can live in, and he has to work. And then him and Knockland, he basically resumes a life in Leisureland that was like the one he had at the beginning of the movie, but it's with Knockland, and he's actually helping people now. He's still involved in the community that she's a part of.
Yeah.
So that's essentially it.
Yeah. So one of the things that I had a problem with in the original movie that you also give is why do you think Paul didn't want to go down the vault?
Yeah, so I don't know. I think it's not really explained. To me, it's not an issue. I think it's one of those we need this, for this story arc to happen, I don't know.
Because I think in your version it works because you're calling out issues with moral superiority. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
You don't use moral superiority to win an argument. It's not a good, like, an appeal to ethics, yes, but moral superiority, like, oh, I do this, therefore I'm better than you, is not, that's not altruism.
Right.
You know what I mean? That's not, so I think, like, when Naklan calls Paul out on stuff like that, where she says, like, you know, why are you actually doing this? Are you trying to be morally superior, or are you trying to be altruistic? Because the two are not the same.
Right, exactly.
And so he says, you know, so, like, I think when it's all other families, I think you might lose that a bit, because it's like, yeah, okay, that might be hard, but also, you know, Paul has been single for the past year, and
right, yeah.
So I don't know. To me, it seems like it might work better if you always show Paul, like, at the last minute he makes a decision where, yes, the vault would be a great thing, but his reasons for going into the vault are moral superiority, not altruism. Yeah,
exactly.
And I think that might work better rather than, like, showing the sentimentality of having a family.
Yeah, actually, you know what? I would agree with that. As I was sort of reading through my pitch, and I was writing it, that was a bit that I struggled with too, because it does seem sort of strange to send him somewhere just to have him change his mind. But I think that's actually a good way, because, like, what is it that he actually learns by going there, and what does he see that makes him go, oh, I didn't know this before about myself, but now I've realized that what I'm doing, if I go down here, I'm not actually fixing the problem with myself that I thought I had. And so in my version, what I tried to do is make it more like he says he's doing things to help, but he's really doing it because that moral superiority, and B, because there's actually some comfort that he gets out of it. Like, there's something that he actually gets in return.
I'm doing a good job, so therefore I'm a good person. And it's like, okay, yeah, but if you do the right thing for the wrong reasons, is it really the right thing?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
Yes, you're doing something better, but then I think, you know, not when Naklan says something like, you know, you being here and helping the people who are living here who maybe, you know, can't afford to go into the vault. And I'm not talking about money affordance. I'm talking about, you know, those who don't have skills that we find valuable, you know.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
You know, so yeah, you're an occupational therapist. Good for you, you know. Naklan is, you know, a political dissident who doesn't actually have any skills on paper skills, right? Clearly she's a gifted speaker and but, like, you know, she wouldn't be allowed to go into the vault, even though she's friends with Jørgen Asbjørnsen, because she doesn't have doesn't have the skills they want. So, like, when we talk about Mr. Cardenas and those people that she looks after, she's like, I can't leave them. They don't have the skills that would allow them to go into the tunnel. Somebody has to look after them. You know, you have the skills to look after them. I don't.
Right. Actually,
so if you go into the tunnel, are you? Yeah.
Right.
I don't know.
Exactly. Actually, you know what? That's actually an even. I hadn't thought of that before. Making Jørgen even, like, there could be a scene where he makes some comment, a side comment to Paul, like, look, I can't bring Naklan because she's going to be a burden to us because she doesn't have, like, it could even be like she doesn't have a limb, so, like, it's not going to be easy, and also she doesn't have any skills on paper. Exactly. And he's like, and I hate to say this, like, he's like, I know on a level it really bothers me because I know what she's doing is important, but he's like, but this is also the survival of the human race, and we have to be selective of who we bring with us.
Yeah.
And you'd fit and so then even Jørgen is sort of moral, even though he's sort of the savior of the planet, he's morally compromised too. Yeah. Which actually I think makes his character more interesting.
Yeah, I think so too, where he's like, I'm trying to do the right thing, but also, how can we invite Naklan if she is A, missing a limb, and B, doesn't have a formal education?
Right, exactly. And
you know what I mean?
And like, Naklan knows this, but then she also goes, okay, well, that's fine. There's all these other people who are getting excluded, and I think I'm going to help them because they're the ones who really need the help. They're the ones who we should be looking after. And you're just taking your perfect.
You're going to be an occupational therapist in a vault filled with healthy people.
Exactly.
Because only healthy people are allowed in. Are you just being morally superior? Or are you being altruistic?
Exactly.
Yeah.
There we go.
That's excellent.
There we go.
That's awesome.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
I think we both came up with really solid pitches for that.
Yeah, I think we both sort of nailed in, because when I first watched the movie, I was like, again, what is this movie about? But I think we both sort of nailed this idea about consumerism. And I think my favorite part about your pitch was sort of when Jorgen sort of makes an offhanded comment about the fact that downsizing didn't catch on in America until it was commercialized, like until people realized that the amount of stuff they would need was directly, or the amount of stuff they could afford is directly proportional to the size that they are.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So like, because now you're like, oh, I need clothes. Well, a shirt that's this size costs me, $25 Canadian. Versus, if I'm 5 inches tall, then the same amount of material will cost me pennies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
pennies
and it's something that's something sort of alluded to in the movie. They don't really allude to it. You see, like, you go from Leisureland in America. I'm sure they were making a statement in the movie, like, this is the American, like, colony, and then this is the Norwegian colony, and it's this, like, old school European, like,
yeah, I thought that might have been a little bit idyllic.
It was. It certainly was.
It's supposed to be like a little bit of that like, oh, we're like European Arcadia, perfect place.
Exactly.
But which kind of bothered me.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, and actually, and this is why I like your suggestion to make Jorgen even more, like, he's not perfect. He's basically he's basically engineering a eugenics component.
Yeah, and I think you could make it really interesting if you wanted Jorgen really important to the B plot, which would then become the A plot. But if you wanted Jorgen to be really important, you could actually show him, like, really struggling with this, but also being like, if this is the survival of the human race, then who do we bring? Who do we get to bring? We only get so many places.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? Who do we get to bring? And then it's not just about who can afford it, because then it becomes like issues of you notice that most of the people who are going to the vault happen to be white people.
Exactly, yeah.
And it's not because the white people are white, and it's not because they're wealthy directly, it's because they have the skills that can afford them. They have the skills that have been afforded by their money. Exactly,
and their privilege from being born wherever they were with that skin color, basically.
Exactly. And I mean, you can show poor white people too. Not that there aren't poor white people. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying, the overwhelming majority of people who have those kinds of skills would be white people.
Uh-huh.
So the doctors, the PhDs, the
engineers,
the engineers, the electricians, because I'm certain there would be there would be a need for those, you know what I mean? So now we have people who have those kinds of skills, would be asked to join, and those who do not, who are perhaps not more physically able, would be seen as a burden. And then you run into issues of like, it's a little bit eugenicsy.
Yeah, exactly.
About genetics.
Yeah, exactly. There we go.
Yeah. Well done.
Yeah, you too. High five.
Oh, thank you.
On the Skype.
Yeah, internet high five. This has been, this was the hardest one for me to do, but I'm really glad that we did it, because now that I've done it, I'm quite proud of my pitch. I think conceptually the idea of those concentric reoccurrences works well for my pitch. And I'm really, really like your pitch too.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any last minute thoughts?
I enjoyed that. I mean, it was fun for me because it was an interesting exercise looking at a movie on its own I already really appreciate, but then asking like, oh, how could it be different? And so I wouldn't say I think my pitch is necessarily an improvement. I just think it's different. I just think it's a different movie that deals with the same themes and maybe works around some things that I thought were problematic. But I want to stress this. I love the movie as is. I think it's an amazing film.
I wouldn't have watched it if you hadn't suggested it. While watching it, the entire time I sort of had this like slouched over look like, what am I watching? But now that I have watched it, I enjoy talking about it. I probably will recommend it to others who want to think about this kind of stuff. But I will say that I think this is my second best pitch after The Matrix.
I think I would agree, actually. I think this is one of your stronger pitches too.
Oh, wow. Such flattery. Yeah. I think The Matrix is still my best. But
I think Matrix was for both of us. I also had a lot of fun with that one too.
Really good. But it was a good movie. It was a good movie, so good source material. But I think this is one of my better pitches. And I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed talking about this movie more than watching it, which might say something about the movie itself, or it could say something more about me.
I was gonna add this. I do think it's a movie that's more about its ideas than it is about the story per se.
Yes.
And I think this is why watching it a second time I appreciated it, because it's I think it's much more about the concepts in it.
Yeah.
Which is maybe why it doesn't grab as many people.
Yep. Yeah, I can get that. It is a movie that is the narrative arc is harder to follow because the ideas are sort of what's pulling it along.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Cool.
I really enjoyed that.
I guess, do you have anything else you want to add, or should we wrap it up here?
I think we should wrap it up.
All right. Well, you have been listening to CineMasters Ultimate Timeline. You can follow. I don't know. I guess we did some plugs at the beginning, but.
Well, you can follow Robot Philosopher. That's my band. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on YouTube. You can find CineMasters on Facebook and YouTube. And give us a like, give us a share, and yeah.
Yeah, and you can follow me at Nate Draper at Twitter. I'm also on Instagram as Draper Nate, I think.
Cool.
One of these days I'll get that right.
One of these days we'll get it down, yeah.
Anyway, thank you for listening. Have a good day, everyone, and we will catch you later with some more CineMasters.
Peace.
Peace.